The Sunnyvale Pines subdivision was the sort of place people often described as idyllic. Sprawling, neatly trimmed lawns stretched across two-story houses decorated with matching shutters. Driveways gleamed, sometimes hosting children's bikes and sidewalk chalk art. A small wooden sign at the entrance read, in tasteful lettering, "Welcome to Sunnyvale Pines. A community for all." Most who lived here believed that sign genuinely reflected their neighborhood spirit. Barbecues on weekends, holiday decor contests, and kids playing basketball in the cul-de-sacs until dusk. The unity was in large part nurtured by the local homeowners association, HOA. Like many suburban HOAs, it existed to maintain certain aesthetic standards and property values. Usually, it functioned smoothly. Occasionally, disputes over fence heights or house paint hues would arise, but they were resolved quietly. Then came Donna Kershaw, a middle-aged woman with a severe bob haircut, crisp button-down blouses, and a gaze that could freeze the hearts of unsuspecting neighbors. Though her official name was Donna, everyone privately called her Karen, after the archetype of an imperious, meddling busybody who demanded to see the manager. Donna seemed to relish the moniker. Not that she acknowledged it openly, but she certainly embraced the spirit of self-appointed authority. She had moved to Sunnyvale Pines 2 years ago, following an acrimonious divorce. While many neighbors offered her a warm welcome, Donna reciprocated with condescending smirks and offhand critiques of their choices. Soon enough, she volunteered for the HOA board. No one batted an eyelash at first, figuring that new residents often sought ways to become part of the community. Little did they know that Donna Kershaw was the sort of woman who believed that the rules existed primarily so she could wield them as a weapon. Among the board members, Donna quickly earned a reputation for zero tolerance. Leaf piles in a neighbor's yard, kids' toys left overnight on the driveway, or even lawn ornaments that strayed from the approved color palette. These were all transgressions in her eyes. She hammered out warning letters and fines with alarming efficiency, sending them in official HOA envelopes so that no one could ignore them. Those who dared question her found themselves cornered by an unending litany of references to obscure bylaws. She wore her membership on the board like a badge of supreme authority. But in the summertime, the unstoppable force that was Donna Kershaw met an unmovable object, the communal sandbox at the center of Sunnyvale Pines Park. The HOA had established a modest playground there for younger children. Nothing fancy, just a few swings, a small slide, a jungle gym, and a wide wooden box filled with sand where toddlers could happily build castles under the watchful eyes of parents. On any sunny afternoon, one could find squealing kids scooping up buckets of sand, forging alliances in imaginary kingdoms, or flinging grains at each other in harmless fun. For Donna, however, the sandbox represented something else, an invitation for noise, clutter, and, heaven forbid, untidiness. She cringed whenever she saw children tracking sand onto the grass, or whenever she found a half-buried juice box that had missed the trash bin. Despite repeated reminders that kids will be kids, she fumed. Day after day, the cheerful squeals and messy shoes reminded her that, try as she might, she couldn't control everything in Sunnyvale Pines. The seeds of the looming conflict were planted during a casual HOA meeting one muggy evening in June. Donna arrived in a neatly pressed blue suit, brandishing a clipboard, and immediately listed her grievances about the reckless misuse of the communal sandbox. While most board members dismissed her complaints, after all, a sandbox was for playing, Donna insisted that something needed to be done. And so, unbeknownst to the rest of the board, she formulated her own plan to deal with the problem. Summer was in full swing, the days long and filled with children's laughter. A father named Miguel Ortiz took his 4-year-old daughter, Sierra, to the playground around noon one Saturday. The sun was high, and the temperature was steamy, but the sandbox was tucked in partial shade thanks to a row of maple trees. Sierra was delighted to see that some of her friends had already arrived, and together they began constructing a small sand city, complete with tunnels and moats. Miguel leaned against the playground fence, chatting with other parents who watched their kids scramble around on the jungle gym or chase each other across the grass. It was a picture-perfect scene, reminiscent of simpler times, sweaty brows, the aroma of fresh-cut grass, and the easy camaraderie of neighbors. Suddenly, an argument broke out between two of the kids in the sandbox over a toy shovel. They were about 4 or 5 years old, each refusing to give up the bright red plastic spade. Voices raised, tears threatened. Parents stepped in, gently negotiating. It was over in a minute, replaced by giggles and the renewed partnership of building a taller sandcastle. Donna, who had been walking her small dog along the paved path, stood at a distance, glaring. Miguel caught the tail end of her expression and felt a mild shudder. She looked incensed, over something trivial. He noticed her scribble something on a small notepad. Then, she turned sharply and continued walking, her posture rigid. Miguel thought little of it at the time, chalking it up to typical Karen behavior. But over the following days, more parents observed Donna lurking near the sandbox, snapping pictures with her phone. Some overheard her complaining aloud about the noise, or about how the sandbox attracted pests. A rumor began to spread that she intended to bring the matter up at the next HOA meeting, urging them to replace the sandbox with a concrete courtyard. The very idea horrified parents who believed that the sandbox was a focal point of childhood fun in Sunnyvale Pines. When the rumor reached Cynthia Baker, the PTA president and mother of 3 boisterous kids, she laughed. "She can't get rid of the sandbox," Cynthia told her neighbors. "That's like banning laughter or sunshine." The rest of the board would never agree. Indeed, most believed the sandbox was safe. Yet a small knot of anxiety tightened in the stomachs of those who recognized that Donna always seemed to have a trick up her sleeve. Sure enough, the topic of the sandbox arose at the next HOA meeting. It was held in a converted community room near the park, where board members sat at a long folding table facing rows of chairs occupied by residents. Donna arrived early, setting up her laptop and a small projector. When her turn to present came, she theatrically dimmed the lights to display a slideshow. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, clearing her throat, "I have documented evidence that our communal sandbox poses a serious health risk to the children of Sunnyvale Pines." With that, she clicked through a series of photos, grainy images of a half-eaten snack, footprints in the sand, what might have been an insect or two. "All of this," she declared, "invites vermin, insects, and potential disease-carrying pests. Not to mention, children's scuffles in the sandbox can lead to injuries or, worse yet, lawsuits." The handful of parents in attendance exchanged exasperated looks. The evidence was laughably thin: a single cookie crumb, some footprints, and maybe a stray beetle that found its way into the sand. But Donna spoke with such conviction, flipping page after page of irrelevant HOA regulations, that some began to wonder if she might succeed. Her approach was to wear everyone down by burying them in paperwork. Then, another board member, Richard Caldwell, calmly raised his hand. "Donna, we appreciate your diligence," he said, "but we've had the sandbox for more than a decade with no reported incidents of disease or major injuries. The city even did a routine check last year and found nothing amiss." Donna's lips pressed into a tight line. "That was before the population of this neighborhood exploded with new families," she retorted. "We have a responsibility to act proactively. I propose that we close the sandbox for a thorough inspection at the very least. Then, if it proves too risky, we replace it with a safer, cleaner option, like a small rock garden or a turf area." A murmur of resistance swept through the residents. A father in the back row stood up, pointing out that the sandbox was one of the few features designed specifically for young children. Others nodded in agreement. Yet Donna persisted, pressing the board to consider liability. In the end, the board tabled her motion, agreeing only to conduct an extra inspection by a local park maintenance team. They also asked parents to be vigilant about picking up trash in and around the sandbox. For the moment, the sandbox remained, but the tension was palpable. Families sensed that if Donna's campaign against it failed through official channels, she might resort to less straightforward methods. No one guessed just how extreme her solution would be. Early one Wednesday morning, long before the park filled with the laughter of children, Donna slipped out of her house in dark workout clothes. She carried a plastic grocery bag in one hand, and inside that bag, hidden from view, was a gallon jug of industrial-strength bleach. By the time the sun peeked over the horizon, she was at the sandbox. The neighborhood was mostly asleep, save for a few dog walkers and joggers. She scanned the area, noting that the playground was empty. The hush of dawn muffled her footsteps across the dew-kissed grass. Then, without hesitation, Donna crouched at the edge of the sandbox and began pouring bleach onto the sand. She moved methodically, saturating the grains with the pungent, chemical liquid. Steam-like vapor rose in faint wisps. The stench was overwhelming. Her expression, had anyone seen it, might have been described as grim determination. She believed she was doing Sunnyvale Pines a favor, saving children from the supposed health hazards she had so diligently invented. Deep down, though, even Donna might have sensed how twisted her actions were. When she finished, the jug was empty. She tossed it back into her plastic bag and quickly scanned for witnesses. Seeing none, she hurried back home. The entire act took less than 10 minutes. No dramatic confrontation, no watchers from behind parted curtains. If any neighbor had been up that early, they were too far away to notice. At least, that was what Donna hoped. That morning, as families filtered into the park, an odd smell greeted them. Naomi and Chris Shepard, parents of twin 5-year-olds, approached the sandbox with caution. Chris wrinkled his nose and said, "What's that smell? It's like a pool, but stronger." Naomi inched closer and gagged. The overwhelming bleach odor stung her nostrils. She rushed to stop her kids from plunging their hands into the sand. Another parent nearby did the same. In minutes, confusion and alarm spread through the small group of parents. Some whipped out their phones to call the HOA or the local non-emergency line. Others glared in every direction, as if seeking the culprit. Word traveled fast. By noon, nearly every parent in Sunnyvale Pines knew that the sandbox had been contaminated with bleach. The city maintenance team cordoned off the area with yellow tape. An urgent message went out on the neighborhood forum, warning families to stay away until further notice. Several parents were furious, vowing to find out who had done something so reckless. After all, bleach in a sandbox could cause severe chemical burns if kids touched it, not to mention potential respiratory harm from the fumes. The property manager, who had arrived on the scene by mid-morning, shook his head in disbelief. "I've never seen anything like this," he muttered. "It's one thing to want changes, but this is a crime." Within hours, a chorus of accusations erupted on social media. "Who would do this? We need to check the security cameras. This is beyond a prank, it's malicious." The entire neighborhood reeled from the shock. Sunnyvale Pines had always been peaceful. The notion that someone would deliberately endanger children was almost unthinkable. Many residents called for an immediate police investigation, but with no direct evidence or cameras pointed at the sandbox, the authorities had little to go on. They took a statement from the property manager, logged a report, and promised extra patrols. That was the best they could do without eyewitnesses. Parents led the charge in demanding answers. They formed a group chat, brainstorming ways to identify the culprit. Some suspected teenagers, others guessed it might be a disgruntled ex-employee of the city's park services. However, those who had witnessed Donna's animosity toward the sandbox couldn't help but suspect her. After all, she'd publicly declared the sandbox a health hazard, and she had an extensive track record of extreme behavior. Yet suspicion alone wasn't enough. No one had direct proof. Miguel Ortiz recalled seeing Donna skulking around the sandbox at odd hours, but that wasn't conclusive evidence of sabotage. Cynthia Baker had overheard Donna muttering about drastic measures, but without a confession, they were stuck. Meanwhile, the bleach-soaked sand was now toxic waste, requiring special disposal procedures to remove and replace the entire sandbox. The price tag would be hefty, and some worried the HOA might not be willing to pay. As tension mounted, neighbors did their best to maintain normalcy. Children still deserved a place to play, so the park swings and jungle gym remained open. But the big wooden sandbox, once a hive of childhood imagination, lay surrounded by caution tape. The injustice of it all rankled the community. The once harmonious vibe of Sunnyvale Pines turned sour as parents realized they had to keep a closer eye on their kids and their facilities. It felt like innocence had been stolen. Far from being apologetic, Donna grew bolder in her criticisms of the sandbox. Now that it was unusable, she feigned ignorance about the bleach incident while continuing to spread fear. "Didn't I warn you all that the sandbox was unsafe?" she would say, shaking her head in faux concern. "Look at what's happened. If children had been in there when the bleach was poured, can you imagine the lawsuits?" She implied, in her roundabout way, that she was the neighborhood savior, someone who had foreseen an inevitable disaster. That her own words sounded suspiciously like a confession escaped her entirely. Many neighbors bristled when they heard her talk like that. Yet Donna evaded direct confrontation. Anytime someone asked if she had any involvement, she'd fix them with a patronizing stare. "Do I look like a vandal to you?" she would say, offended. "I'm merely stating facts." Rumors intensified. Some believed Donna had an accomplice, while others thought she acted alone. A few wanted to form a vigilante group to stake out the park at night in case she tried something else. But cooler heads prevailed, reminding everyone that they needed proof before accusing someone so brazenly powerful within the HOA. Though Donna wasn't the HOA president, she was influential enough to make life miserable for those who openly opposed her. Her track record of filing complaints and fines was legendary. Nevertheless, parents felt cornered. With the sandbox destroyed, younger children had lost their main source of free play. Parents worried that if they tried to replace the sand, another incident might occur. Fear and uncertainty grew in parallel with anger. A solution was needed, but no one had a clue how to keep the communal sandbox safe from sabotage if it remained out in the open. One evening, a small group of parents gathered at Cynthia Baker's house for an impromptu brainstorming session. They sat around the living room, sipping coffee, while half a dozen children played board games on the carpet. The topic, of course, was how to restore a safe play area for their kids. "We could ask the HOA for security cameras," suggested Naomi Shepard. "But that might take forever to approve, and who knows if they'll place them near the sandbox." Miguel Ortiz frowned. "Even if we do replace the sand, what's to stop the culprit from pouring bleach again? We can't guard it 24/7. Cynthia's brow knit in frustration. "I don't want to let whoever did this win. Our kids deserve a sandbox." It was Chris Shepard who first floated a wild idea: a portable sandbox. He recounted a memory from his own childhood on a farm, where his grandfather had converted an old horse trailer into a mobile petting zoo. "What if we do something similar with a trailer or small flatbed? We fill it with sand, and we tow it from house to house on a rotating schedule. That way, it's never in one place long enough to be sabotaged, and the kids still get to play. We could call it something fun, maybe the Sandbox Express." At first, the others laughed at the absurdity of towing a box of sand around the neighborhood. But as they talked it through, the idea became increasingly appealing. If they kept the sandbox mobile, no one person, Donna or otherwise, could claim it violated permanent park regulations. It wouldn't technically be on HOA property if parked in a private driveway or curbside in short intervals. They could move it daily, so it would never be left unattended too long. The kids might even find the novelty exciting. The group recognized that the cost might be significant: buying or building a trailer, obtaining enough sand, and ensuring it was secure for children to play on. But they also felt a surge of determination. If the communal park sandbox could be destroyed by a single malicious act, perhaps a roving sandbox would defy that sabotage. They agreed to float the idea to more parents, gauge interest, and possibly launch a crowdfunding campaign if enough people were on board. Cynthia jotted down the plan: locate an affordable trailer or large flatbed. Reinforce the sides to hold sand securely. Obtain safe, clean play sand in bulk. Establish a rotating schedule so that each day, the Sandbox Express would park in a volunteer's driveway for supervised play. Spread the word among the neighborhood kids, turning it into an exciting, inclusive project. Enthusiasm lit up their faces as they realized they might have found a solution, one that not only protected their kids, but also thumbed its nose at whomever had destroyed the original sandbox. By the end of the evening, they had a plan. The era of the portable sandbox was about to begin. News of the portable sandbox proposal spread quickly. Parents who heard about it were intrigued, and many offered support, both financial and hands-on. Within a week, Cynthia Baker found a used utility trailer for sale at a neighboring town's farm auction. It was rusted in spots, but sturdy and large enough to hold a decent amount of sand. A small group of volunteers pitched in to purchase it, naming themselves the Sandbox Express Committee. They towed the trailer to Miguel Ortiz's driveway, where a few handy neighbors spent 2 weekends welding metal sidewalls to hold the sand. They installed a latchable gate to allow easy access for cleaning. After scrubbing off the rust, they painted the trailer with bright colors, yellow, green, and red, and stenciled the words Sandbox Express across each side. Soon enough, it looked less like a humble farm trailer and more like a roving carnival attraction. The next challenge was sand. They needed a large quantity of clean, child-safe play sand. A local hardware store caught wind of the plan and offered a generous discount, even throwing in free shipping. On a mild Saturday morning, a truck delivered pallets of bagged sand. Volunteers formed a line and tore open bag after bag, dumping it into the trailer until it was piled high. The children watched excitedly, some even grabbing small cups to measure out the sand, as if preparing for an epic science experiment. Once filled, the trailer weighed thousands of pounds, prompting them to upgrade the tires and brakes to handle the load. It was a bit more labor-intensive than expected, but each hurdle only fueled their determination. By the time everything was in place, the Sandbox Express had come to life. A traveling sandbox that could be hooked up to an SUV or pickup truck and hauled to a new location every day. During this flurry of activity, Donna, ever suspicious, hovered at the edges, phone in hand. She snapped photos, scribbled notes, and occasionally confronted the volunteers. "Do you have a permit for that trailer?" she'd demand. "Is it even legal to park it in a driveway? Aren't you violating some noise ordinance?" Each time, the parents politely but firmly reminded her that private property usage did not fall under the same strict HOA guidelines as communal areas. In truth, a few aspects skirted the edges of regulation, but they were willing to fight for it if it came down to an HOA dispute. Donna's fury was palpable. She saw the trailer as a direct affront to her authority, a brazen attempt to undermine her. She huffed and puffed about, bringing this to the attention of the board. Yet the parents pressed on undeterred. Freed from the constraints of the communal sandbox at the park, they were forging their own path, one that Donna would find much harder to bulldoze or bleach. On a warm Friday afternoon, children gathered on Cynthia Baker's front lawn, waiting eagerly for the Sandbox Express to arrive. A modest crowd of neighbors turned out, curious to see the roving wonder. As the trailer came into view, towed by Miguel's SUV, the kids cheered, jumping up and down. Painted in bright hues, with colorful flags fluttering from each corner, the Sandbox Express exuded a festive, almost parade-like aura. Miguel parked the trailer carefully, lowering the stabilizing legs so it wouldn't shift. Parents unlatched the side gate and placed a short wooden ramp so children could climb in. Giggling kids swarmed the new sandbox, plunging small buckets, rakes, and toy cars into the sand. They squealed with delight, marveling at how it was almost the same size as the old sandbox back at the park, perhaps a bit smaller in surface area, but more than enough for a half-dozen kids to play simultaneously. Adults lingered, snapping pictures and congratulating each other on the accomplishment. Even older kids and teens wandered over, intrigued by the novelty. Some admitted that while they'd outgrown sandcastles, they wanted to help in a spirit of solidarity. Donna, of course, was nowhere to be seen during this celebratory moment. The families relished her absence, enjoying a fleeting sense of relief that they could let their children play without fear of sabotage. Yet they knew that her reaction would come sooner or later. By evening, the Sandbox Express had already become a viral sensation among the neighborhood's social media pages. Photographs of smiling children, sand toys, and whimsical decorations circulated with captions like, "You can't stop the fun in Sunnyvale Pines," or "Who needs a park sandbox when you have a traveling one?" The new roving sandbox schedule was posted publicly. Each day, the trailer would appear in a different driveway for a few hours of supervised play. Parents volunteered in rotation, ensuring no single person bore the brunt of hooking up the trailer or monitoring safety. In the midst of the laughter and relief, a fresh spark of hope flickered through Sunnyvale Pines. It felt like a grand victory, not just for the parents, but for the spirit of community. After all, the attempt to destroy the sandbox had given birth to a resourceful, even more unifying solution. The traveling play pit became a nightly topic of conversation, reminding neighbors that sometimes adversity can lead to surprising innovation. Despite the initial success of the Sandbox Express, tensions simmered. A mere week after its debut, parents began noticing subtle signs that Donna was maneuvering behind the scenes. The first came in the form of official-looking letters slipped into mailboxes of those hosting the trailer. Notice of potential HOA violation. Residents are reminded that storing trailers on driveways for extended periods may be subject to fines. Furthermore, The presence of children's gatherings without prior board approval may violate noise ordinances. You are advised to remove the trailer immediately. Sincerely, Sunnyvale Pines HOA. However, these letters were not on the standard HOA letterhead, and they weren't signed by the HOA president or the property manager. People quickly deduced they were from Donna. When confronted, she merely shrugged. "I'm on the board, and I have every right to issue warning letters," she insisted. But without the full backing of the HOA, her threats rang hollow. Next, she showed up uninvited whenever the Sandbox Express was parked, her phone camera rolling. She'd filmed the kids playing, often zooming in on even the tiniest scuffle. If a child cried because they got sand in their eye, Donna would pounce. "I'm documenting this. You'll be hearing from my lawyer if you don't have liability insurance," she'd bark at the parents, who tried to remain calm, though it was increasingly difficult under her antagonistic scrutiny. Some neighbors felt anxiety creeping in. After all, they weren't legal experts. Did they need special insurance for a traveling sandbox? A quick call to a local attorney reassured them that so long as it was on private property with the homeowner's consent, typical homeowner's liability coverage applied. The attorney also confirmed that no special permits were required for a trailer used recreationally, provided it wasn't left on public roads for extended periods. Reassured, the parents pressed on, though the stress of Donna's watchful eye weighed on them. Still unsatisfied, Donna raised the matter at an official HOA meeting, demanding that the Sandbox Express be banned from Sunnyvale Pines. She cited everything from potential chemical leaks from the trailer to uncontrollable noise. But the rest of the board was tired of her vendetta. With no real evidence of wrongdoing, and with so many parents vouching for the Sandbox, the board voted to let the matter lie, effectively siding with the community. Donna's fury was palpable as she stormed out of the meeting. The next phase of her retaliation would be anything but subtle. A few days later, the Sandbox Express was parked in Naomi and Chris Shepard's driveway. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the scene. Children played happily, building forts and tunnels while parents chatted nearby. Everyone seemed at ease, until a sudden shout broke the momentary peace. "Stop! Get away from it," someone yelled. A teen named Alicia Green pointed toward the side of the trailer where a middle-aged figure stood with a small bottle in hand. It was Donna, apparently trying to pour something into the sand. Alarmed parents rushed over, and Donna jerked backward, dropping the bottle. A pungent chemical smell wafted up from the ground. Naomi snatched the bottle and recognized the label for an industrial-grade weed killer. Some of it had spilled onto the grass near the sandbox, leaving the lawn discolored. Gasps and angry accusations erupted. "What on earth do you think you're doing, Donna?" Chris demanded, standing protectively between her and the sandbox. Children looked on, wide-eyed, clutching each other. Donna's expression was a twisted mix of defiance and fear. "I was preventing weeds from growing in the sand. Isn't that what you do with a sandbox? Keep it clean." Her flimsy excuse might have been laughable if the situation wasn't so dire. She had nearly poured hazardous chemicals into the same sand where toddlers were digging. It was a flagrant act of sabotage. Neighbors swarmed around. Someone grabbed their phone to call the police. Others started filming, capturing Donna's face as the meltdown ensued. She tried to snatch the weed killer bottle back from Naomi, but Chris blocked her. "You've gone too far," he said, voice shaking. "You're endangering our kids." Within minutes, 2 squad cars pulled up, lights flashing in the quiet cul-de-sac. Officers stepped out, receiving a chaotic barrage of explanations. They took statements from multiple witnesses, bagged the bottle as evidence, and placed Donna in the back of one cruiser while they sorted out the details. Children huddled behind their parents, tears of confusion streaming down their cheeks. Donna was eventually released after questioning, but not without a citation for trespassing and attempted property damage. The parents, furious and still reeling, demanded the fullest extent of the law be applied. The incident rattled the entire neighborhood. For the first time, an actual crime was on record, and Donna's hostility toward the sandbox was exposed for all to see. Even those who had doubted her involvement with the Bleach incident began to realize just how far she was willing to go. The local news caught wind of the dramatic scene. By the next evening, an intrepid young reporter stood outside Sunnyvale Pines, microphone in hand, describing how a member of the HOA board had been accused of trying to poison a traveling sandbox. The story generated a flurry of online discussion, with outraged parents from other neighborhoods expressing solidarity and condemnation. At the subsequent HOA meeting, now packed to capacity, neighbors demanded Donna's immediate resignation from the board. Richard Caldwell, the HOA president, awkwardly tried to maintain order. "We must follow due process," he said. "We can't remove an elected board member without a formal recall petition." And so, the recall petition began circulating. Within days, it amassed signatures from almost every household. The mood in Sunnyvale Pines had shifted from disbelief to outrage. Even residents without children were horrified by Donna's escalating tactics. The Bleach incident had been appalling enough. Now, she had been caught red-handed with weed killer. Whatever illusions of innocence she'd maintained were shattered. Donna attempted to spin the story, claiming that she was only trying to maintain healthy standards. She insisted that certain weeds could harbor allergens, and she was acting in the best interest of the children. But no one was buying it. Her long-standing campaign to eliminate the Sandbox was well documented. The weed killer was the final straw. As the recall petition reached its threshold, the HOA scheduled a special meeting to vote. Public sentiment was overwhelmingly in favor of removing Donna from her post. Realizing she had lost, Donna became uncharacteristically silent. No letters, no phone calls, no confrontations. Some neighbors joked that she was holed up in her house, poring over legal documents for a last-ditch effort. Others suspected she might leave Sunnyvale Pines altogether. Meanwhile, the Sandbox Express continued its rounds, bolstered by an outpouring of neighborhood support. The children, initially rattled, found a renewed sense of joy in watching the grown-ups unite to protect them. Each time the trailer arrived in a driveway, families felt a surge of collective pride. The special recall meeting took place on a balmy Tuesday evening at the local community center. A standing-room-only crowd gathered, many wearing matching t-shirts emblazoned with "Save Our Sandbox." The tension was thick, a swirl of both anger and anticipation. Donna Kershaw entered alone, head held high, though her eyes flickered with anxiety. She took a seat at the front, separated from the rest of the board by a couple of empty chairs. Richard Caldwell began the proceedings with a heavy sigh. "We are here today," he said, "to address the recall petition against board member Donna Kershaw. We will allow both sides to speak before we vote." First, representatives for the parents spoke, recounting the Bleach sabotage, the weed killer incident, and the repeated intimidation. They cited witness statements, police reports, and reams of forum posts documenting Donna's vendetta. Every parent who spoke delivered a personal anecdote, a moment when their child's enjoyment of the Sandbox had been threatened or ruined. Then, Donna was given the floor. She stood and cleared her throat, a folder of documents in her hand. Rather than apologize or deny wrongdoing, she launched into a tirade about maintaining standards and preventing lawsuits. She insisted she was the victim of a witch hunt, that all her actions were misunderstood. Her words, however, were drowned out by a wave of skepticism. People had heard it all before. When the time came to vote, the process was straightforward. Ballots were cast, tallied on the spot by a neutral party. The result was decisive. An overwhelming majority voted in favor of recalling Donna from the HOA board. Applause and cheers erupted, echoing through the community center. Some residents chanted, "Justice! Justice!" while others simply sighed with relief. Donna stood there, momentarily frozen. Then she gathered her folder, turned on her heel, and marched out without a word. Despite her best efforts to maintain composure, it was clear she had been irrevocably defeated. In that moment, Sunnyvale Pines felt a collective lifting of pressure, as though a looming storm cloud had finally dispersed. In the days following the recall, the HOA swiftly filled Donna's vacant board seat with Sharon Liu, a retired elementary school teacher widely admired for her warmth and fairness. Sharon's first act was to confirm official support for the Sandbox Express, designating it as a recognized community project. No more half-baked accusations or warnings would hamper it. Sharon also pledged to restore the original park Sandbox, promising that the HOA would fund a thorough cleanup and replacement. Even though many families adored the traveling Sandbox concept, they welcomed the idea of having both options, an official Sandbox in the park and the mobile version for special events or block parties. The children, thrilled, fantasized about having twin sandboxes at their disposal. Under Sharon's guidance, the mood in Sunnyvale Pines improved dramatically. The rancor and suspicion that had shadowed the neighborhood began to fade. Neighbors felt confident enough to plan an end-of-summer block party, complete with face painting, a potluck, and a special station for the Sandbox Express, which had become something of a local celebrity. As for Donna, she retreated. Many speculated she might move away, unable to live in a place where she had publicly lost face. But for the moment, she remained in her house, curtains perpetually drawn. When neighbors passed by, they occasionally glimpsed her peeking out, a bitter expression on her face. A few felt pity, wondering if she suffered from loneliness or regret. Others reasoned that she'd brought her downfall upon herself. Meanwhile, children continued to gleefully shovel sand, build imaginative forts, and bury toy dinosaurs. Every swirl of golden sand reminded them, and their parents, that the community had triumphed over malice. The traveling sandbox had united them in ways they never could have imagined. Word about the Sandbox Express spread beyond the borders of Sunnyvale Pines. A neighboring district invited the traveling sandbox to be part of a family fun festival. The organizing committee reached out, offering to pay a small fee to transport the trailer and set it up as an attraction. The parents who had spearheaded the project thought it was a wonderful opportunity. Thus, one bright Saturday, the Sandbox Express made its debut at a festival in the next town over. A small caravan of supportive neighbors tagged along, turning it into a celebratory road trip. Kids raced to see how far they could fling the sand, using toy catapults or molding imaginative sculptures. Onlookers marveled at the concept of a roving sandbox, praising the ingenuity behind it. Some even asked if they could replicate the idea in their own communities. Throughout the day, the Sunnyvale Pines parents shared the backstory. They spoke candidly about the sabotage, the Bleach incident, and the relentless determination of their HOA Karen. But they also emphasized the positive outcome, how adversity had sparked creativity and a strengthened sense of community. Festival attendees were riveted by the dramatic tale and inspired by the solution. By the festival's close, the Sandbox Express had garnered plenty of attention and also raised a modest amount of money. The parents decided to funnel those funds back into the community, perhaps to build a shade canopy or purchase more toys. The entire experience felt like the perfect victory lap for a project born from frustration, yet culminating in joy. Back in Sunnyvale Pines, while the traveling sandbox's popularity soared, Donna plotted her last stand. The recall might have ended her official HOA power, but it didn't extinguish her vindictiveness. Late one evening, a neighbor named Tia Sanders was walking her dog when she noticed the glow of a flashlight in Donna's side yard. Feeling uneasy, Tia paused in the shadows, watching. She saw Donna prying open a large wooden crate, from which she extracted a sign. Upon closer inspection, Tia realized it was a massive banner that read, "Ban the Sandbox truck, endangering our children," followed by a link to a bizarre website Tia had never heard of. It seemed like Donna planned a public demonstration or some form of protest. Early the next morning, Tia quietly alerted her neighbors. Sure enough, around noon, Donna emerged from her house, rolling a portable sign frame toward the front of her yard. She hoisted the enormous banner, its harsh words visible from halfway down the block. The sign was an eyesore, and the message was nonsensical. Many neighbors, seeing it, erupted in laughter or shook their heads in disbelief. Eventually, a few parents mustered the patience to approach Donna, trying to talk her down from this strange protest. "Donna," said Miguel, "no one wants more conflict. Why not just let it go? The Sandbox Express isn't harming anyone." She retorted, "You'll see. Soon enough, there will be an accident, and I'll be vindicated." The anger in her voice was edged with desperation. It was clear she felt wronged, convinced that her downfall was the product of a conspiracy rather than her own destructive actions. The neighbors decided not to engage further, letting Donna's outburst fizzle on its own. Over the next few days, the banner stayed up, but passers-by paid it little heed. Some posted mocking pictures on social media, pointing out the irony of calling a child's sandbox endangering. Under the wave of ridicule, Donna finally took the banner down, retreating once more behind closed doors. With Donna effectively neutralized, the parents focused on positive developments. True to their promise, The HOA replaced the old bleach-contaminated sand at the park, installing fresh, sanitized sand. They also added a sign with a whimsical cartoon castle, encouraging kids to keep the area tidy. A small shade canopy was erected to make the space comfortable on scorching summer days. Now the neighborhood boasted two Sandbox experiences, the stationary one in the park and the traveling Sandbox Express. On any given afternoon, you might find a cluster of children happily building sandcastles in the park while the Sandbox Express entertained a birthday party or neighborhood get-together on someone's driveway. The synergy was delightful, a testament to what could be accomplished when neighbors supported each other. Cynthia Baker, who had once been uncertain about the feasibility of a roving sandbox, looked upon the busy scene with pride. "We turned a nightmare into something beautiful," she told a friend. "I never thought we'd be so grateful to that Bleach incident, but if it hadn't happened, we'd never have thought of the Sandbox Express." Of course, no one truly thanked Donna for her destructive acts. But, in a strange twist of fate, her sabotage became the catalyst for deeper bonds among Sunnyvale Pines residents. Block parties were more frequent. Neighbors who had scarcely known each other beyond a wave hello now participated in extended social gatherings. The children, once traumatized by the Bleach incident, felt reassured by the attention and care their parents had poured into creating safer spaces. As summer gave way to early autumn, the evening air turned cooler. One late afternoon, the Sandbox Express was parked in Tia Sanders' driveway. Families chatted under strings of fairy lights, sipping cider. Kids frolicked in the sand, some wearing light jackets. Out of the blue, a familiar figure appeared at the edge of the lawn. Donna Kershaw stood there, her posture tentative. Conversations hushed. A few parents instinctively moved closer to their children. Donna cleared her throat and took a timid step forward. "May I speak with you all?" she asked quietly. The surprise was palpable. For months, Donna had been the neighborhood pariah, barricaded behind her bitterness. Now she was here, apparently wanting to talk. Cynthia stepped forward, her expression guarded. "We're listening," she said, arms folded protectively. Donna hesitated, glancing at the swirling dust motes in the air. She looked down, as though searching for words. I know what I did was extreme," she began, voice wavering. "I really did believe the sandbox was dangerous. I thought I was protecting kids, but I realize now that I went too far." A hush fell over the gathering. Chris Shepard raised an eyebrow, remembering that day she nearly doused the sand with weed killer. Others recalled the Bleach fiasco. Could this be genuine remorse? Donna's eyes glistened, and she struggled to maintain composure. "I lost a lot when I moved here, my marriage, my old life. Maybe I channeled all my frustration into controlling this neighborhood. I'm sorry." Some parents exchanged unsure glances. Others softened slightly, recognizing a human vulnerability in Donna's words. The children, sensing tension, stepped away, continuing their sand play quietly. "Thank you for telling us," Cynthia replied, her tone cautious. "But you hurt a lot of people." Donna nodded, hands trembling. "I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness right away. I just wanted to say that I'm sorry for the trouble, especially to the kids. If there's anything I can do to make amends." Her voice trailed off. No one spoke for a long moment. Then, in a display of the generosity that made Sunnyvale Pines special, Miguel Ortiz said, "We'll need time. But if you're serious, maybe start by helping keep the park sandbox clean, without chemicals," he added pointedly. A small, sad smile appeared on Donna's face. "I can do that," she whispered. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving behind a swirl of uncertain emotions. Whether her apology signaled genuine change or was just a fleeting moment of guilt remained to be seen. Donna's apology, while not universally accepted, marked a shift. Some neighbors remained skeptical, refusing to engage with her. Others, guided by compassion, tentatively encouraged her to participate in community events under close watch. She attended a cleanup day at the park, raking leaves and picking up litter. Although she spoke little, her presence was enough to spark conversation. No one forgot her past deeds, but the immediate hostility eased. Children still gave her a wide berth, particularly those who vividly remembered the Bleach fiasco. Yet time has a way of dulling the edges of even the sharpest conflicts. As Halloween approached, the neighborhood turned its attention to decorations, costumes, and candy. The Sandbox Express even got a spooky makeover, with parents adding fake cobwebs and plastic spiders to delight the kids. On Halloween night, Donna made a subtle gesture that surprised many. She left a basket of candy at the foot of her driveway with a sign inviting trick-or-treaters to take some. She remained inside, the porch light dim. While it wasn't a grand public gesture, it was a small step toward normalcy, perhaps even an olive branch. Meanwhile, the neighborhood thrived. With Donna's sabotage no longer looming, parents relaxed. The traveling Sandbox made appearances at block parties and even a local fair, spreading the spirit of Sunnyvale Pines beyond its borders. The restored park Sandbox, too, became a popular hangout once again, a testament to the community's persistence. As the calendar turned to winter, snow dusted the rooftops of Sunnyvale Pines. The Sandbox Express Committee decided to store the trailer in a volunteer's large garage, safe from the elements. Children, now wrapped in coats and mittens, occasionally asked about the Sandbox. Parents assured them it would return in the spring, ready for another season of mobile fun. Some might say the story ended there, but in truth, the essence of the Sandbox Express never left. It became a symbol of unity, resilience, and the creativity born from adversity. Within the following year, neighboring communities launched their own traveling playgrounds, a sign of how far-reaching an idea born of defiance could go. Donna Kershaw's story, too, evolved. She remained in Sunnyvale Pines, gradually building fragile bridges of trust. She never recaptured her former authority, nor did she want it, but she found a quieter role, occasionally helping with less controversial HOA tasks, like organizing recycling days or reviewing landscaping requests. Over time, some neighbors forgave her, others merely tolerated her, but the community overall moved on. Years later, children who had once crouched in the bleach-stained Sandbox recalled those events with a mixture of shock and amusement. They would tell younger siblings or new residents, "Did you know our traveling Sandbox was created because a cranky lady poured bleach into the old one?" The newcomers would laugh, marveling at how the darkest actions sometimes lead to the brightest solutions. Thus, in the annals of Sunnyvale Pines, the saga of the bleach-pouring Karen and the invention of the Sandbox Express became local legend, a cautionary tale about the perils of extremism and the power of community spirit. And every spring, when children flocked to the newly re-emerged Sandbox Express, it was clear that the joy of play was an unstoppable force, triumphing over fear, anger, and one woman's misguided crusade. Under the gentle warmth of a spring sun, the Sandbox Express rumbles out of storage for another season, newly repainted and filled with fresh sand. Families gather in driveways to greet its arrival, toting bags of toys and plastic pails. Laughter and squeals echo through the air as the children climb aboard, wiggling their toes in the soft grains. Somewhere, watching from a distance, stands Donna. Her stance is less rigid these days. Though she might never be fully embraced by the community she once antagonized, she recognizes the simple truth. The Sandbox will always belong to the children, and no amount of sabotage can suppress their need for fun, friendship, and adventure. And so, life in Sunnyvale Pines continues on, a testament that collective goodwill can triumph over even the most toxic acts. In this corner of suburban America, a roving Sandbox, once forged from desperation, remains a bright beacon of how ordinary neighbors, when united, can outshine any storm brewed by a single malcontent Karen.